Well, for me, my favorite punk fashion moment, without question, is the haute couture. I think it was 1999, 2000 haute couture show. It was Christian Dior, and it was at Versailles. And I remember showing up, and it was this amazing night at Versailles, beautiful, sunny weather, everybody there. The who's who of the fashion world was there, some big champagne, and expecting something quite romantic and poetic, as you usually expect from John Galliano. At least at that time, what you were expecting from John Galliano was very romantic, bias cut dresses and things like that. And we all finally sit down in this room, and there's this giant long runway, I think it's like a football field long, and it's got this water on top of it underneath a plastic cover, and then at the end of the runway there's this countdown happening, kind of like a rocket ship is about to take off. And that's really what happened. This fashion show just rocked the fashion world. It was completely out of left field, and that's why I thought of it as being kind of punk. Was this, that whole idea of punk for me is challenging the status quo, really, making people question what they consider as, reality, and posing questions, and really challenging everything about what they think is beautiful, what they think is fashionable. And that's what this collection did. I mean, it was completely radically different. The first look out the runway was all black, asymmetrical, models with black makeup and, berets and looking, like they'd come off the street, Mad Max, Matrix kind of thing. So it was really quite a shock and quite disturbing for a lot of people. People didn't know what to think of it, and I think that's what punk is about, really challenging people.
I'm interested that you make that definition of punk, because people often pick out Galliano as someone who is a punkish designer, certainly punk in spirit. Do you remember that kind of feeling kind of? You said people felt kind of a bit disturbed by it. Do you remember feeling moved by his show? Because people often say they cried at a Galliano show, for example.
Yes, I remember. I mean, for me, I'm a romantic at heart, and I have a soft spot for the romantic side of fashion. So for me, there was a twinge of disappointment, because I was expecting, at such a romantic location, that there would be, a romantic, as he had been doing up until that point, a romantic show. And so it really was, I think, the start of that kind of punky side of him, that now, of course, that we saw later. He did the Lauryn Hill thing, and he did the Hobo collection. So there was that he became more and more famous for. But that was really the kickstart of it. He had just been re-signed, I think, for another 3-year contract to Dior. He really, wanted to, I think at that point, felt like he could really mix it up and try something new. It was this whole idea of taking something and typical, because I think his themes in this show were a lot of, English aristocrats and field sports. So you were seeing these amazing hats being done by Stephen Jones, with boars and, dead birds on them, and these amazing hats and things like that. So it was this whole idea of this aristocratic side of thing, and then just taking all that out of context and mixing in this kind of gothic Mad Max punk, Dago colors. So it was just such a radical experience to see all of that. And then the top models just, walking down the runway, and always at a Galliano show, I mean, he gives them all of these backstories. So they just have, it's like theater with him. It's a huge moment. But I remember myself being, there's a twinge of disappointment. And I remember when there was a series of these bias cut, beautiful, prettier colored dresses, maybe more quote unquote, appropriate. And I was, really thrilled to see that. I was like, well, at least there'll be something for me in this collection. But I mean, it was such a radical and shook up the industry. And he did that over and over again, all the way to the end of his career.
And was there a particular moment of that show that really stood out for you?
At the finale was Carmen Cass, and she came out with this punky mohawk, and behind her was carrying this giant, parachute kind of skirt or jacket or whatever going out behind her, and she had to walk that whole water-filled runway in these stiletto heels, which I thought were going to pierce the water at some point, and walk that whole, and when she stopped in the middle of the runway, she was panting from the effort, and I just got to give her, really fashion props, because that was such an impressive performance, and Galliano did bring the best out of all of those models that he had in this run. You've got to give him credit for that.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually, because a lot of people say that what's so great about Galliano is the way he made his models feel.
Yes.
It's almost like they weren't playing a character; they sort of became that character. Could you see that in Carmen?
Oh God, in Carmen, yes, you could totally see Carmen. It was absolutely in character. You could see All of the models, Giselle was there. I mean, all of the models just came out and they just worked it. I mean, if you can find, I don't know if you can find footage of this show, but if you can find it, if you get any shots of their faces, they were in it to win it. I mean, they were so much in character. They weren't, themselves. They were this embodiment of whatever John Galliano had whispered in their ear before they walked on the runway of who they were. And that was always, such a pleasure to see. You were really transported always with his collection. And this particular show, you were transported to a completely new universe when everybody was, terrified about Y2K and worried about what the future would hold in just a few months if everything would crash and burn. It was quite a shock to the system.
Hmm. Do you think that, I'm interested how you talk about punk, because for you it very much seems to be, an attitude rather than an aesthetic, because you talked about why this was so punkish for you is it completely flipped everything on its head. Is that when fashion's most exciting in your mind, when it's just a complete curveball?
Oh God, if it doesn't challenge you, if it doesn't make you question yourself, I think that's what fashion is all about. Those are the things, those are the best moments of fashion. If it's what you've come to expect, then that's not what it is about. For me, fashion is about challenging, pushing forward. And I think that's also what the essence of punk is when you combine, for me, yes, the essence of punk is the idea of challenging and making people really re-examine what they consider to be reality.
Making people sit up and listen.
Oh God, yeah. That's what else do you want from fashion? Is for people to sit up and take notice. And for me, that's it. I mean, I remember Isabella Blow sitting in the front row, and she was wearing some sort of headgear that looked like she was, one of those monsters out of the Alien films, and just ecstatic. I mean, for me, that was just an unforgettable moment that really shook up the industry and I think really transformed it for the future.